South Africa spent $3 billion hosting the 2010 World Cup. FIFA made $2.3 billion surplus from that same tournament. And South Africa isn't even close to the worst example. Every few years, a country wins a World Cup bid and the headlines go wild. Economic transformation, $1 billion in tourism, jobs, infrastructure, legacy. The government stands at a podium and tells the nation this is going to be worth it. But then there's a set of numbers that barely anyone actually talks about. Numbers that come from FIFA's own annual reports, published, audited, right there if you want to look at them. And once you see how the money actually moves in a World Cup, the whole thing looks very different, because the question isn't whether the World Cup makes money. Of course it does, enormous amounts of it. The question is who it makes money for. To understand why host countries almost never come out ahead, you need to understand the commercial structure underneath the tournament. FIFA owns the premium rights stack, all of it. Broadcasting, marketing, licensing, hospitality, ticketing, every major commercial revenue stream from the World Cup flows to FIFA, not the host country. FIFA's own accounting makes this explicit. In 2022, those 5 revenue categories alone were worth $5.58 billion to FIFA in the tournament year. And what does the host country own? The stadium construction loans, the security operation, the airport expansion, the new metro line, the roads, the border control, the telecom upgrades, the public branding, the emergency services, and then after the tournament ends and the cameras all go home, the maintenance bill. That asymmetry is the whole story. FIFA books the TV money, the host books the roadworks. And you can see it clearly when you look at FIFA's own published numbers across 4 tournaments. In 2010, FIFA reported $3.65 billion in World Cup revenue against $1.3 billion in expenses, a surplus of about $2.3 billion. In 2014, $4.8 billion in revenue, $2.2 billion in expenses, surplus of $2.6 billion. In 2018, $5.3 billion in revenue, $1.8 billion in expenses, surplus of $3.5 billion. In 2022, approximately $5.5 billion in rights and matchday revenue against $1.8 billion in Qatar investments, surplus of roughly $3.7 billion. That's FIFA's picture, not the hosts. Which is exactly the point. Every 4 years, the surplus goes up. Every 4 years, a different government is holding the infrastructure bill. Now, there are 2 genuine exceptions to this pattern, and both of them prove the same rule. USA 1994 and Germany 2006. USA 1994 is the strongest modern case for a host coming out ahead. The US used existing venues, including the Rose Bowl, the Silverdome, Giant Stadium, no new stadium construction. They set a World Cup attendance record that still stands today. 3.5 million across the tournament, 96% capacity on average. The organising committee announced a profit of about $55 million. The US Soccer Foundation still exists today as a direct legacy of that surplus. Germany 2006 is the other partial exception. About 1.4 billion in total stadium works across 12 venues, but the financing mix was unusual. Some venues were privately funded, some were largely club funded, some were local government rather than national bill. And on the inflow side, Bundesbank data showed roughly 1.5 billion in additional tourism income during the tournament period compared with the year before. On a narrow lens, it's close to break even. So 2 successes in the last 30 years. And what did they both have in common? Neither of them really built much. USA used what it already had. Germany renovated existing stadiums in cities that already had strong football demand. So the venues had tenants before the tournament started and kept them after. That's the only formula that makes hosting financially survivable. Don't build anything you wouldn't have already built. The problem is most hosts do build, and when they do, the story goes somewhere else entirely. Brazil 2014 is probably the clearest example of what the white elephant problem actually looks like in practice. The final reported cost was around $27 billion. Planning documents put it at $25.6 billion, and federal government line at the time tried to argue that only $8 billion had been spent exclusively because of the World Cup. with $4 billion of that in stadium loans that were meant to be repaid. These aren't contradictions. They're different political frames for the same number. You can tell how uncomfortable the real figure made people by how hard they worked to try and find a smaller one. Brazil did get a genuine tourist bump, of course they did. Record foreign visitor spending of $6.9 billion in 2014, roughly 1 million additional international visitors, real money moving through their economy. But while that was happening, FIFA was having its best ever commercial return. 4.8 billion in revenue, 2.6 billion surplus, including a $453 million contribution back to the Brazil Organising Committee, which sounds generous until you see what FIFA kept. And then there's the Manaus Stadium, Arena Amazonia, built in the middle of the Amazon rainforest, cost around $300 million, hosted 4 World Cup group stage games, and then essentially stopped being used as a serious football venue. Manaus became shorthand for the problem. Brasilia was similar. Impressive architecture in cities without enough football demand to justify what was built. South Africa 2010 tells the same story with cleaner numbers. The South African finance minister at the time publicly stated that the country spent more than $33 billion over 4 years on infrastructure and preparation, 12 billion on stadium infrastructure, 11 billion on transport, the rest on telecoms, broadcast and public services. Tourism income from World Cup visitors, $3.64 billion. So that gap is 3.6 in versus 33 out. That's the host country World Cup experience in one sentence. But of course, South Africa got something real from 2010. National branding, continental pride, a genuine moment. Nobody who was there seemed to regret it on a human level, but the financial legacy of the stadium programme was described by Leicester Academic Work as an oversupply of over-designed and underutilised venues. In plainer terms, buildings they couldn't fill and couldn't afford to run. And this is the bit that never makes the bid stage presentation. The costs that show up after the TV crews have all gone home. In Russia, post-event reporting put average stadium maintenance at around $4.5 million per venue per year. For regional cities with modest football demand, cities that have been given state-of-the-art 90,000 seat stadiums because the World Cup required it, and then had to work out how to pay for them indefinitely. The bid stage economic models love to stop the clock at the final whistle because the numbers look a lot worse if you run them through the next 10 years of municipal budgets. So what does all of that mean for the 2026 World Cup? The honest answer is the 2026 World Cup is genuinely very different, but it's also not the clean win some people are presenting it as. The US, Canada and Mexico are leaning heavily on existing infrastructure. NFL stadiums in Los Angeles, New York, Dallas, Miami, no Arena Amazonia situations. The white elephant risk is materially lower than it was in Brazil, Russia or Qatar, and that matters. But let's look at who's actually set to win from this tournament. We know the answer. FIFA is projecting $13 billion in revenue for the 2026 cycle. The expanded 40-18 format means more games, more broadcast windows, more commercial inventory. Team distributions alone have been raised to $871 million, reflecting how lucrative the expanded format has become for everyone involved in the commercial structure. Fox and Telemundo are projected to generate $850 million in US advertising revenue alone. That's broadcasters, that's not even FIFA's number. Canada's Parliamentary Budget Officer, which is their independent public spending watchdog, now estimates Canada will spend $1.066 billion to co-host 13 matches. Federal, provincial and municipal contributions combined, up to $145 million of that just for security. $1 billion for 13 games of football in a country that already has the stadiums. And the socio-economic modelling attached to the tournament claims that up to $40.9 billion of global GDP impact and over 800,000 jobs, which sounds extraordinary until you notice that those are gross impact forecasts using generous multipliers. And Canada's Parliamentary Budget Officer figure is an actual public spending estimate. They're not the same types of numbers. Mixing them is how governments talk themselves into expensive decisions. The academics who study this keep coming back to the same point. The right question isn't, did money move? Obviously it does. It's the World Cup. Hotels fill up, flights sell out, replica shirts shift like crazy. The right question is, did this use of public money outperform what the money could have done otherwise? And the answer to that question across almost every World Cup in recent history is probably not. 2026 is a better shot than most. The existing infrastructure model is genuinely the right approach, but we won't actually know the real answer for another 3 to 5 years when the operating costs are settled and the full public accounts are in. But what we do know right now is that FIFA's commercial model is extraordinary. 13 billion in projected revenue. The host governments carrying the public costs, broadcasters making hundreds of millions in ad revenue. The whole world is going to be watching, which is exactly what makes this business model work.